One of the attributes of nanotechnology that appealed to us, and we thought that a superhero contest might inspire students to learn more about these materials, things like gecko gloves that let you climb a wall like Spider-Man, or the invisibility cloaks that are now possible at a small scale. And honestly, everything that Batman uses is enabled by nanotechnology for sure. Welcome to Stories from the NNI, the National Nanotechnology Initiative. I'm Lisa Friedersdorf, Director of the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office. In this episode, I had the pleasure to speak with Joy, the 2018 high school level winner of Generation Nano. Joy won for her comic Heliora, about a young woman who uses nanotechnology to protect her city from the evil Dr. Blackburn. You can find a link to her comic below. Joy, thank you so much for chatting with us this evening. Can you tell us a little bit about Heliora and your winning comic?
Heliora finds herself in the beginning of the comic on a rooftop in her city called Brightfield. And Brightfield is covered in solar panels, everything's going well, and she's helping to defend the city until she encounters Dr. Blackburn, the villain, whose plan is to cover the entire city in a cloud of ash, blocking out the sun and any hopes of harnessing its power for energy, so that everyone in Brightfield will depend on him for energy. Heliora is like, that's not going to happen, and she goes to confront him, and he says, I've struck on a cloudy day, thinking that her suit would be powerless that way from the sunlight. But because she has a graphene-enhanced battery on her back, she's able to fly up and confront Blackburn in spite of the lack of sunlight. So she fights him back until he is arrested by the police, and she saves the day that way, and the sun comes out at the end of the comic. So that's the story of Heliora.
At least the first episode.
Yes, to be continued, I guess.
So I really like that you have not only highlighted the application of graphene in the solar panels, but really articulated the need for this backup power in the form of a battery. So I thought that when I first read your comic, I felt like that was a really great acknowledgement to the need for batteries as backup to solar energy, and that nanomaterials are used in both of those applications.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's something I'm really interested in.
Can you describe Generation Nano?
Of course, yeah. Generation Nano first caught my eye when I was on social media, and I saw that there was this contest that combines two of the things I'm most passionate about, science and cartooning. And so I looked further into the competition and went on the website and found a lot of really cool examples from previous winners. I instantly realized that this is the perfect way to pursue what I'm most passionate about and design a piece of art that would have a scientific message behind it.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you were able to find it on social media. And in the process of putting together your superhero, how did you come up with this idea and the story behind it?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with solar energy and alternative energy in general. Like, I have solar panels on my house, and I was looking at them one day and I was like, I think more people should know about how cool solar technology is. So I did definitely start with that idea that I wanted to spread the message about the sun and solar panels and the capacities they have in future technologies. I actually started with that solution in mind, and this character Heliora sort of crept into my head, when I was hanging out, when I was like doing my homework or going for a run. I started to have more and more creative ideas pop into my head about a storyline I could develop that would appeal to younger kids and would appeal to people who are interested in the field of nanotechnology. And it did require some research on my part to develop her as a character and to develop her super suit, but pretty soon I had a 3-page story going.
Did you know anything about nanotechnology before you saw this contest and started putting together your superhero?
I'll admit I was not an expert in nanotechnology before entering this contest. I knew some of the basics, like nanometers being a billionth of a meter, unfathomably small, 1 times 10 to the negative 9th of a meter. We learned about some of that in science class, but I knew that nanotechnology had applications in medicine because I had seen in other Gen Nano entries, at least, a lot of films and pathogen fighters that took the form of nanotechnology. But graphene, the substance that I chose to focus on, was just kind of the name of a mystical substance to me. So I chose something on purpose that I wanted to learn more about and how to combine it with solar energy, and ended up learning a lot more about the future of graphene and nanotechnology through my research.
There's so much in that statement that I want to follow up with you on. Let me start with the fact that I'm thrilled that you learned about it in school and that you had at least knowledge of what nanotechnology was. And then you also referred to graphene as a mystical material. And I noticed in your submission that you also referred to kind of it may look like magic, but Heliora owes her powers to science and technology. And then I'd just like you to comment on that aspect of your comments and your observations.
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's one of the main points I wanted to get across in my comic, was that you can have a technology like Heliora's that is bordering science fiction. And I had a lot of people ask me about this at the conference, but where do you draw the line between what's possible and what's fantasy-based story of a superhero? And I think that looking at developments in graphene, even in everyday things like batteries or in the screens of technology devices, or accompanying silicon and other materials forming like efficient semiconductor systems, I think that all of these applications are really going to develop over the next 20 years. And I think we shouldn't dismiss something like a solar suit instantly as being unattainable or science fiction, because I have these visions of applying graphene on a really larger scale once it gets off the ground over the next few decades. And I'm excited to be a part of a generation that develops that.
That's great, Joy. That's really great. You mentioned in passing the science fair, and as part of winning Generation Nano, you were invited and you showcased Heliora at the USA Science and Engineering Festival in Washington, D.C. at the National Science Foundation Pavilion. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like and maybe some of the questions that you were asked?
Attending the festival was definitely the biggest highlight for me. I think it was the greatest prize of the entire experience, because I was surprised by how many kids instantly came up to me in my booth and were so fascinated with what it was I was doing. I actually put together a costume in the weeks prior to the festival where it was definitely a much lamer version of what you see in the comics, but I had a little set of wings and a pair of ski goggles and a white bodysuit. So I had a lot of younger students come up to me and say, "Why are you dressed up? You know, what does your suit do?" And I'd point to the comic and try to explain how energy from the sun can power a suit of armor like that, or it can power her ability to fight crime. She uses the sun to do that. And I spoke to a lot of, people of all ages, really, and all backgrounds. I had some scientists come up to me, and a lot of teachers come up and ask about the ways to use materials like this in scientific outreach and scientific communications, especially using comics in the classroom. So some of my favorite conversations were about that. And some kids would come up and ask questions that I hadn't even thought about, like asking about the physics and dynamics of her wings and the weight of them being able to sustain her as she flies. And I said, wow, you should write the next volume of this with me. So by far, the highlight of my experience was getting to showcase Heliora at a booth in the festival.
That sounds like you had a lot of really productive conversations with other students, and hopefully you inspired them to participate in the contest next year. And some of the questions that they asked you that you didn't quite know the answer to, is it something that you've had a chance to kind of go back and research and explore on your own?
Yeah, through talking to a lot of those people, I did think of developments in Heliora's suit that could be expanded upon in a further issue. I know there is a big movement right now to teach physics through comic books, and a lot of books have been written on that. And I was thinking of maybe developing a second or third or fourth issue of Heliora where I delve more into the background of how she engineered something like this and how else she can use it besides in a single rooftop scene that I had portrayed. And I'd also like to go more into her battery technology, because the battery that she wears on her back, I got a lot of questions about, because it's something that mimics a power wall or a rechargeable battery that a lot of people have on their in their house solar systems right now, like their solar technology systems. So because that's something that actually exists, I would definitely want to push further into that and where it's going to go in future years.
That's fantastic. That's really exciting. In your comic, you write that with science on my side, I fight for my city, for the environment, and for a brighter future. I mean, what an awesome line. What are you planning to study in college?
I would definitely like to study environmental science and policy. That's what I'm considering right now as my major. And after having gone through this experience with Gen Nano, I'm thinking about a minor in visual arts or even some way of studying nanotechnology, because I don't want to just stop here. I feel like there are a lot of possibilities in college to keep this sort of thing going. So any form of scientific communications, I'd like to integrate into my major and study the environment for the next 4 years.
Well, that sounds very interesting, and I think that you've highlighted a couple of areas where nanotechnology can have an impact. You talk a lot about solar panels, but there are a number of different areas where nanotechnology can be used to purify water or to help environmental cleanup. So I think that it's a very rich area to study, and you'll really encounter nanotechnology in really broad range of science and engineering topics. So I think that you can't go wrong there. Do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I would just say that I think there is virtually unlimited power to visual communication in science. And I think with all of the issues that we've been discussing, like the other applications of graphene or of alternative technologies in general, I think that the most powerful way we can focus on communicating it is through comics or drawings or videos and animation, stuff like that. I'm really excited to spend the next 4 years and after my college career continuing to pursue artwork as a way to connect with people. And I can't express how grateful I am to have been a part of this experience with Gen Nano and seen the power of visual communication in action within science.
Well, we're really glad that you saw that in social media and you chose to participate. I'm thrilled that this contest inspired you to learn a little bit more about graphene in this nanomaterial, and that you've combined your passion for science with your artistic ability to tell this story. This is really inspiring. I would say that as I look to the future and see the challenges that face the world, you mentioned the environment and energy, water, all types of areas where nanotechnology can play a role. I think it's students like you that are really got to be the ones that save the world, and we're thrilled that you participated in this contest.
I was hoping that Heliora's tagline at the end of the comic would serve as a source of inspiration for other young people who are passionate about saving the world in that sense. So I made sure to create a powerful tagline for her. With science on my side, I fight for my city, for the environment, and for a brighter future.
And Joy, I'm not sure that there's anything left to say after that. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today and share your story. Truly inspiring.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Stories from the NNI. If you would like to learn more about nanotechnology, visit www.nano.gov and check back here for more stories.